Part 2 of WWE 2K15 Raw vs. SmackDown. Let's go! So next up on the lineup is the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, the first time that I actually get to revisit a pay-per-view concept in the series. It's, of course, not going to be the last, but this was the first, we've now gone through a full year in Universe mode, and we had the WWE Draft, which built up to this. We got to shake up the rosters and everything. It was a new beginning for Universe mode, and unfortunately, Extreme Rules doesn't really carry that vibe, because the majority of this is just, well, maybe not the majority, but there's a good bit of WrestleMania leftovers in here. You've got a United States Championship rematch, an Intercontinental Championship rematch, Tag Team title match carries over from the Shield Wyatt family match. There's just a lot of leftovers. The only thing that really gets changed is that The Rock doesn't get a rematch for the WWE title because, let's face it, nobody, not even me, wanted him to win the title in the first place, so I wrote him out as quickly as I could, which was definitely beneficial to the series moving forward, but it definitely just goes to show how stupid that WrestleMania main event was. But anyways, let's get into the beginning of this match card, and I think we kicked things off with the Intercontinental Championship rematch between Titus O'Neil and Ryback. I don't have much to say on the match from a technical level as far as spots or anything like that, because this was still before. Really, the reason why I haven't been using footage in I've been using the promo footage rather than the actual matches. One is because I don't really have most of my older footage. It's on YouTube that I could download it, but part of that is that I'm lazy, and also the footage just looks like garbage in general, so I'm less motivated to actually get that. But once we hit and it's also that, nothing, because I didn't have, full control of production, not much of the visual aspect of it looks very compelling, because once we get to Payback, then I'm starting to take control of the product, and I'm actually planning out spots and all that stuff, and the footage looks nicer. It's up to the quality that I use today. It actually looks HD, and it's not super, faded because of all the cross-converting and reconversions, and it was just terrible. But yeah, once I get up to Payback, I'm going to start showing footage for the matches I'm talking about, even though, nowadays, not nowadays, but currently I have not been using that footage. I don't think it's really necessary to include it, because I haven't been referencing specific spots or certain instances in the match, just because I don't really remember many of this stuff. Maybe it's just that episodes back in the day took less time to produce because I didn't really care about how they looked. I just wanted to move forward. And so when I spend more time on the matches, of course I'm going to remember them more. They're going to stand out to me more because I put more effort into it. I had more time to put it all together, but early shows did not have that. This match was okay, but from a concept, it's just a rematch. It's a rematch because Ryback lost the title at WrestleMania, and even though Ryback was drafted to Raw to get him away from the Intercontinental title, I still felt the need to have him use his rematch clause anyway. Really, drafting him to Raw was supposed to be the way for me to avoid using the rematch clause. That's why, for the tag team titles with Finn Balor and Hideo Itami, I had them split on different shows, which was a way of avoiding the need to use the rematch clause. It's my way of not using it, because, the tag team is split up, they're on different shows, so, what are all the implications of that? And plus, the idea was that each superstar wanted to go their separate ways for that tag team rematch specifically. With Ryback, my goal is obviously to push him towards the World Heavyweight title, but let's give him the rematch for the Intercontinental title first. Why? I don't know, because it's required, because that's tradition. Use the rematch, don't just throw it away. It makes sense logically, I guess, from the perspective of the superstar. If you have a shot at a title, why would you not use it? But there are tons of instances in my series and other series in WWE, just in the real world, that people don't use the rematch clauses because it's very obvious that they shouldn't, whether it's a storyline reason, whether it's just the future of that character, where they're trying to go, what their goals are. And with Ryback, there's a big picture of him making it to the main event, and I guess maybe having him lose here was kind of a way to play up the fact that, oh, Ryback is starting to look vulnerable. He had this massive winning streak, but now he's starting to lose. He's starting to make mistakes. But then he just goes back on another winning streak until he wins the world title at SummerSlam, so could have done without this match. It wasn't necessary at all. But I guess I could have done worse. I think this was my way more so of cementing Titus O'Neil as a legitimate contender, like as a legitimate champion, because he won it in a fatal 4-way, not by pinning Ryback, but by pinning Cody Rhodes, I think that was a good way of not making Ryback look weak. But at the same time, I guess there was maybe a risk of having Titus look weak. Never mind the fact that he just defeated Darren Young at Elimination Chamber. Ultimately, I think this matchup was kind of pointless. It does make Titus O'Neil look stronger by actually defeating Ryback one-on-one. And I guess my justification was there was a spot where Ryback hits a shell shocked on the outside. But because it's not in the ring, he couldn't go for the pin in time, so Titus kicks out. So it was kind of like Ryback ultimately took himself out of the match. That was my way of kind of preserving his power, his strength, his credibility, which is fine, I guess. But I think this matchup, I could have done without this matchup, and I don't really think much would have changed. Maybe it makes Titus look a bit more credible, but his title reign, I think, at the end of the day, was pretty credible, more so by what came after. So I really don't think that this matchup was necessary. I could have gone without it. I might as well talk about the tag team title match because it was non-brand exclusive, the Wyatt family versus The Shield. This time it's just Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose taking on just Luke Harper and Eric Rowan. Bray Wyatt has disappeared after the match at WrestleMania. He'll be gone for the rest of 2K15 up until Money in the Bank when he comes back. But here the Wyatt family are still continuing their reign as the tag team champions. I guess because The Shield defeated the Wyatt family at WrestleMania, and I had no other plans for a new team to step up to face the Wyatt family, I figured I'll just ride the coattails of that WrestleMania match and have The Shield step up to face them, which is a recurring theme of this pay-per-view. It's just riding the coattails of WrestleMania. You had the rematch for the Intercontinental title. You have this rematch, although this time it's for the first time for the titles. But the Wyatt family gets the win, and like I said before, this loss for The Shield ends up playing into the eventual split between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. So I do like that. It has good future implications. But it also does a good job of building off of the WrestleMania match. So it's not bad. I'd say it serves more of a purpose than the Intercontinental title matchup did. I'd say it's a good match. I'm okay with it. Then we move over to Raw for the Divas Championship match. This time it's Brie Bella taking on the up-and-coming Paige, and this was where I started to try to put more focus on the Divas division. This was my weak attempt at resurrecting the division, because I was really hype on Paige. She was the anti-diva, obviously, so it was a breath of fresh air to the division, and I think this was around the time that the Women's Revolution was, maybe this was a little before, because I know it was around about that time, I think, because obviously, they could have been in 2K16, and everyone was upset that the Four Horsewomen were not in 2K16, me included. So I think that was a big reason why I ended up just not living up to what I might have been trying to set up here, because Paige and Emma had come in as DLC, so I was starting to build those two up as the next contenders. I forget, was Paige first? Paige might have been... No, she was definitely DLC. I don't remember if they came in the same pack or not, but either way, I was focusing on Paige first. She was my main focus. She was the one I wanted to push to the top right away. So we took the title off Brie Bella here. Paige got the win. It doesn't end up doing much to save the division. Paige gets the win, and she'll have a rematch at the next pay-per-view, and then she'll accidentally drop the title to Tamina at Payback, which I'll touch on later. But I guess it was a good attempt, but my heart wasn't fully in it. And again, this was still before I controlled everything. So what happened at Payback was not of my control. That's when I kind of decided, okay, everything in the future is down to me, because there were a couple matches at Payback that did not go according to plan, and that's when I just gave up on the AI completely. But at least at this point, the AI was putting on some good matches that on occasion were better than the ones that I could produce, even if they weren't, I guess, as consistent. They weren't as consistently paced or focusing on focusing on certain moves that I've sometimes try to build up when I do my own matches. Either way, this one, Paige wins, that's the right call, but I don't even remember the build up to this. I think just Paige won a couple matches. She's the hot new prospect, so give her the shot, put the strap on her, and that's it. It's kind of just hitting a checkpoint rather than actually like putting some like dedicated thought into the match. No, this match better than Over the Limit in as far as the build up goes, which is weird because for Over the Limit, Paige and Brie Bella you'd think they'd have to come into contact with each other more often, because at that point it's more personal, because here Paige is just getting the title shot because she won some matches. She became the contender. Whereas then she took the title from Brie, so you'd think there'd be more of a personal weight to that match, but there wasn't really. So neither of them were very good. This is hardly a point in Raw's favor, but I guess it's not totally terrible. That'll come later for the division. Then we have an Intercontinental Championship #1 contenders triple threat match between Goldust, Darren Young, and Cody Rhodes. Now the plan here was that Darren Young was going to win the triple threat. He was going to go on to face Titus O'Neil at Over the Limit, because that was my big plan, was to have a rematch between the Primetime Players for the Intercontinental title now that Titus had won the thing. But I also would have been okay if Cody Rhodes had won here, because then Cody could have gotten another shot at the title, because I'm still trying to play off that story that Cody Rhodes has been gunning for this Intercontinental Championship for basically his entire Universe Mode career and just hasn't been able to get it. Because at this point, we're now about 2.5 games through this journey that Rhodes has been on, but he still hasn't been able to get the title. However, my ultimate plan was to have Darren win, then set up a match between brothers, the brother versus brother match between Goldust and Cody Rhodes. But if you're at all familiar with my series, you'll know that neither of those two planned matches happened until Payback, because Goldust won this triple threat. Not Darren, not Cody, Goldust. So, no, that's, out of all the people who could have won this match, I get it. It's kind of good in that it protects Cody, in that like he doesn't get his shot and lose. And I guess delaying the match with Darren Young kind of adds more weight to it, but there are plenty of ways I could have done that better. Goldust did not need to win the match here. What I could have done, say we had Goldust versus Cody Rhodes at Over the Limit instead, get that steel cage match out of the way there, or heck, maybe they face off there, Goldust cheats to win. Then you get the steel cage match where Cody gets the payoff. Then, with the Titus Darren thing, maybe they have a title match at Over the Limit and Titus cheats or whatever. I know I'm basically repeating what I just said with Goldust, but there are different ways I could have spun it. Just something to get 2 matches out of each feud rather than just the one each that would happen at Payback. But even then, I think that might have been stronger than just giving Goldust a shot at the title, because there's no real investment in their match at Over the Limit. It's clearly just Goldust won that #1 contenders match at Extreme Rules, and it's pretty obvious he wasn't supposed to win. Let me put no personal investment in this feud whatsoever. Let me not try to develop Goldust's character or anything. Try to give him any sort of reason to have a beef with Titus, because really the thing here is Titus is a heel. Goldust he might not have been a heel at the moment, but he was kind of going to fill that heel role in his feud with Cody Rhodes, because Darren's a face, Cody Rhodes is a face. So instead, we kind of get this heel versus maybe tweener match at Over the Limit, because Goldust wasn't as much of a heel as Titus, so he would have been the more face-ish of the two. But the match means nothing. It's just a way to pad out Titus O'Neil's title reign. And I know I just said that at Extreme Rules, like with the Ryback match, it wasn't necessary, because his title reign would gain credibility later on, which it does. It's just not at Over the Limit. No, it could have done this so much better. I like the match as a concept. Going into the match, it was a good idea, because it's another way to keep building to both of those feuds. But Goldust winning was just the worst possible outcome. And it's not nearly as bad as like The Rock winning the Elimination Chamber by chance, or there are a couple of instances of that where the wrong person clearly won. Goldust might not have been the worst thing, because like the overall impact it has, it's not too, like, the negative implications it has, it's kind of just short-lived because they have their match at Over the Limit, and I do what I had planned to do at the next pay-per-view, Payback. So it delayed everything by a month, so it's not something with like super long-lasting implications, but still, it's bad. Very, very bad. Then we get the United States Championship match between Cesaro and Alberto Del Rio, this of course being the WrestleMania rematch, this time taking place under Extreme Rules. And honestly, this matchup I think did worse than their match at WrestleMania. I know throwing in the stipulation, adding all these weapons and whatnot makes it higher stakes, but the spots I don't think were as memorable. I think the steel steps were involved at one point. Ultimately, this is another one of those, a guy has a rematch clause for a title, so let's use it. And this also continues to build to Over the Limit, which is why I know I remember getting some comments on this kind of somewhere in this time frame, whether it was Extreme Rules or Over the Limit, but both pay-per-views, it's very clearly like a transitional phase. Like, we're coming hot off the heels of WrestleMania, and I'm kind of riding those coattails out as far as I can, while at the same time also laying the groundwork for new stories. But like, it's a slow burn, I think, for both, because the WrestleMania implications don't really start dying off until we get to Payback, which is where I think I finally get that out of the way and start moving forward with stuff. And then with like the building up storylines, most of that would come to a head at Payback. Like the stuff with Darren and Titus, that match happens at Payback. Cody versus Goldust, that happens at Payback. CM Punk, the matches he has with Wade Barrett and Sheamus at Over the Limit play into a fatal four-way, including Roman Reigns at Payback. That's the payoff. That's all the build-up is. It's going towards Payback. So at the same time, that's why Extreme Rules and Over the Limit are some of the most forgettable pay-per-views I've ever produced, is because it's just that transitional phase. I'm clearly just setting up, like, there's not many mini payoffs to build, because like the payoffs you do get, you get Titus defeating Ryback, but that's a WrestleMania leftover. You get Cesaro going over Del Rio and Curtis Axel, but that's a WrestleMania leftover. Paige winning, that's the only payoff that has nothing to do with WrestleMania and doesn't really build to anything at Payback, other than, I mean, she was the champion at Payback, so I guess it builds her up for that, but there wasn't like a feud it was building towards. It was its own moment, but like I said, it's that also was pretty poorly executed. So there's nothing noteworthy coming out of these two shows in particular, whereas like my recent Extreme Rules pay-per-view definitely has some WrestleMania leftovers to it, and I'm definitely setting up more feuds for the future, but there are at least individual payoffs in that show that can stand on their own. Like, you have that fatal four-way match for the World Heavyweight title. That, granted, it is still, in a way, building to future rivalries, but at the same time, it can carry its own weight. You get, there's a match like Shinsuke Nakamura versus John Cena, where that match, it's kind of a self-contained story. It didn't have a whole lot of build-up, but it at least gets some sort of a payoff with that. I had that storyline going, the Tyler Breeze Open Invitational, which wasn't really connected to WrestleMania other than... No, because it wasn't really connected to WrestleMania. I guess it kind of was, in that Apollo Crews took him out at WrestleMania in the ladder match, and then Crews beat him in the Gorgeous Open Invitational, but, like, it's not directly connected to WrestleMania. Tangentially, maybe. And then you have, like, Rusev versus Brock Lesnar, which is its own feud, and it ends at Extreme Rules. No, there is none of that with the 2K15 Extreme Rules. It's either the payoffs are coming off of WrestleMania, and other than that, stuff is building to future pay-per-views. There are no real individual self-contained storylines that get a payoff here or at Over the Limit, because, like I said, there's the Divas match that isn't very good. You get the next match, Christian versus Dolph Ziggler for the World Heavyweight title. That match, not really connected to WrestleMania, because Christian had retained against Edge and Mark Henry, so that was the end of that rivalry. Dolph Ziggler steps up, and he kind of just won the world title out of nowhere. He was a bit of a random challenger. I think he had defeated Christian in a WWE draft match, and then I also kind of connected it back to he had a win over Christian at the WWE Superstars special in 2K14. So there was some history behind it. Dolph Ziggler had been... That would ultimately be a storyline that I would run with, is that Dolph Ziggler continuously defeats Christian over and over. Christian cannot defeat this guy, whether the world title's on the line or not. And that's really the build-up going into Over the Limit, is that Christian loses and loses and loses, and then he turns heel on Dolph Ziggler. Ziggler was already a face by this point, like he had already gone from heel to face a while back. So Christian turns heel on him, and Ziggler plays up the respectable challenger, because he wins clean. He doesn't do any like sneaky, cheaty ways to win, whereas Christian, like, he's just not good enough. His skills fall flat against the show-off Dolph Ziggler. So Ziggler gets the win. He wins the world title here. It was a complete accident. I had never planned for Ziggler to win the title, because Christian had just come off of a title defense at WrestleMania. So the idea was going to be that Christian would carry this title forward, kind of like what CM Punk did on SmackDown. But then Ziggler ended up winning here by accident, which I have covered in my last-minute title changes video. This was never planned, but it was for the better. It was for the best. Ziggler defeating Christian here, it was able to spice up the main event scene, take us in a new direction, get rid of those WrestleMania leftovers, and ultimately Dolph Ziggler, I'd get a whole new storyline out of, well, obviously he would have this big rivalry with Edge and Christian, but then after that, when he loses the world title, I got yet another storyline out of that. Whereas with Christian, I don't think I would have had as much going on, because you want to say, let's say Christian had the neck injury instead. Well, he was a veteran, so at that point I could have just used it to write him out of the series, whereas with Dolph Ziggler, his entire future is in question because he gets this neck injury at Money in the Bank. So there's a real weight to it, because Ziggler has a lot to lose, whereas Christian, kind of near the end of his career anyway, he wouldn't have filled the same role. So Ziggler winning the world title here, a smart decision. It was a good one. The match was, I don't even know why I'm bringing up the match, because let's face it, none of the matches at this stage in the game are really that great. Some of the best matches I actually would produce, like in the 2K15 era, I think was mostly like TV matches, and that was closer to the end of the series. This early section is not as good. And then we move on to the main event. CM Punk defends his WWE title against Wade Barrett. As I said before, The Rock did not get his rematch clause because I didn't want him to have it, and I definitely think that Wade Barrett was a good first opponent. It was a way to get Wade Barrett back up into the main event scene, because he had kind of a shot at getting there prior to TLC when he fought Christian for the #1 contender spot. Of course, he lost that match, and after that, I mean, he showed up at the Elimination Chamber, didn't do a whole lot, leave much of an impact, but having him be the first to step up, he wins a 6-man battle royal by, I think it came down to him, Sheamus, and Roman Reigns. And this is really where I'll start to run with the Sheamus-Wade Barrett alliance. So Barrett stepping up to get a shot at Punk here, he loses, then Sheamus will get a shot at Over the Limit and he'll lose, so they group up, they work together to try to take the title away from Punk, and that's where Roman Reigns steps into the fray, which had also kind of been foreshadowed in that Battle Royal when it was obviously Reigns, Sheamus, and Barrett that it ultimately came down to. In that matchup, you had guys like Chris Jericho, John Cena, and Mark Henry getting eliminated. Roman Reigns, I think, tossed 2 or 3 people in that Battle Royal, so he definitely looked the most impressive. I can recall him eliminating Mark Henry, and I think Sheamus he tossed. He might have also eliminated Cena, but I'm not too sure on that. But then it was Barrett who took him out, which I think was a good way to keep Reigns looking strong, because he eliminated some pretty strong contenders in that match. And even then, when it was 2-on-1, he did toss Sheamus, but it was Barrett who came out with a victory. Because, like, going into that matchup, it was another one of those instances where I would have been okay with several superstars winning, but Roman Reigns, I did not want him to win at all, because if he had won, I would have been pushing him straight to the top, and that's the mistake that WWE made. They forced him straight to the top when no one was ready for him. I mean, the big issue with Reigns in the WWE was that he got injured, but WWE still went through with their plans anyway to have him win the Royal Rumble, which was a huge mistake, and it's a backlash that I don't think Reigns can ever... I mean, he certainly hasn't recovered from it now. Given time, definitely his character will be more fleshed out. He's already gotten better than what he was at the time when this first was an issue. But, I mean, the fan backlash, it's never going to go away. It was a huge mistake on WWE's part, and in that sense, Roman Reigns will never recover from it. Just as far as the fans go, the fans are always going to see him as WWE's golden boy, the guy who they're pushing to the top to be the next John Cena, which is why Cena's promo he cut against him a little while back was why it was really cool, because Well, okay, I'm getting on a side tangent. Maybe I could save that for another discussion video. Maybe I'll save it for like a GM mode thing, because that's typically where I do those discussions. But for this match in particular, Barrett beat Reigns because it was too early for Reigns to win to actually get the shot. I thought Cena winning it might have been okay, but because Cena had just lost the title, there was really no point to having him jump right back into the fold. It would have been far too soon. Sheamus could have done it because, honestly, Barrett and Sheamus, their roles could have been reversed, and it would have meant the exact same thing, which is definitely a detriment to the individual matches, is that they're completely replaceable, completely forgettable. You could have Sheamus win at Extreme, or rather, you could have Sheamus compete at Extreme Rules and lose, and then have Barrett at Over the Limit, and nothing about the feud really changes. It just would, I guess, switch their roles in that one person reaches out to the other first rather than the other way around, but really nothing too impactful from this matchup. As far as where this pay-per-view ranks, well, first of all, Raw versus SmackDown, I'm gonna have to give the edge to... I'm gonna have to give it to Raw. I know that the Punk-Barrett matchup, as far as future implications, was maybe one of the stronger matches on the card. Christian versus Ziggler was also really good, but the Titus O'Neil versus Ryback matchup didn't need to happen. The number one contenders match had the wrong outcome, and it just delayed things. And even though the Divas title match wasn't great for Raw's part, it was still trying to take things in the correct direction, trying to improve the division. And then with Cesaro and Alberto Del Rio, I could have done worse than that matchup, because unlike with Titus and Ryback, where Titus kind of needed the victory for credibility, but even then he didn't really need it, here with Cesaro and Alberto Del Rio, you have kind of that not really a 3-act structure, but you have the rubber match, because Del Rio beat Cesaro at Elimination Chamber, Cesaro won the title at WrestleMania, so now they're even at 1 apiece, giving this rematch at Extreme Rules, which honestly didn't need to be a pay-per-view match, but back in the day, I only really did the major title matches, the major payoffs on pay-per-views, so it was fine. It completed the rubber match, Cesaro getting the win, retaining the title, proving that, yes, his victory at WrestleMania was not a fluke, he is a deserving champion. And this will ultimately set up it kind of plays into the Viva Perfecto tag team, which that also involves Curtis Axel, so he'll step up. We have a triple threat match at Over the Limit. So there is some build-up coming out of Raw that SmackDown, I think, just kind of lacks. Like, SmackDown's... There was build-up there for, like, the Intercontinental number one contenders match, but it was poorly executed build-up. With the Intercontinental title match proper, it was just pointless. And the WWE title match was good, but not enough to save the show. Raw, I think, just had a stronger performance as a whole. And if I had to rank this pay-per-view anywhere, I guess I'll put it below Elimination Chamber, but still above No Way Out, which it's a tough call there, because I still think that No Way Out does a better job at, like, being experimental, at actually trying to do something different, whereas Extreme Rules plays it a little safe, a little too safe. Yeah, but, I mean, Dolph Ziggler winning had big implications. The Shield defeating the Wyatt family had or rather the other way around, the Wyatt family defeating the Shield had big implications for the series moving forward. But, I mean, none of the matches actually really stand out. So, you know what? I'm actually going to have to rank it below No Way Out, but still above the Royal Rumble, because the Rumble, there's just nothing to the Rumble. There's nothing there. You do have the Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar matchup at the Rumble, which was good, and then, of course, the Royal Rumble match itself. Whereas with Extreme Rules, you know what? I might actually have to put Extreme Rules below the Royal Rumble even, because it's just so generic. Because, like I said, it's that middle ground show, and because of that, it really doesn't have an identity to it. It's just there. It's just a stepping stone. It's a step down from WrestleMania, but like a step up to for future things. But there's no individual impact out of anything on this pay-per-view. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to rank it below Royal Rumble, but at the same, no, I'm not gonna put it below SummerSlam though, because SummerSlam, I think, had more incompetence. I guess that's the trick that I'm going to start running into with ranking these shows, is at what point does being incompetent become worse or in some ways better than being, what was the word I just used, of being nothing, of just being generic? Because that's the thing. When you're generic, you're inoffensive, but at the same time, you're also not really, you lack an identity. So you're not super bad, but you're also not super good. And in a way, that in and of itself is bad, because you're not taking risks, you're not taking chances. So even if something pays off, or even if something flops, rather, at least you took a shot, and it could make things better in the future, where that thing actually pays off instead of, like, you can see your mistakes and learn from it. Whereas with Extreme Rules, it's just a whole lot of nothing. There's no identity to this show. So yeah, I'm gonna put it above SummerSlam. It is tough because in competence, you are at least trying something. But when I look at the SummerSlam match card, I think the flaws on that show are just too big to overlook. Like, I mean, the WWE title is not even defended. There's just so much wrong with that show. But even then, like, it's okay. It's kind of at that middle ground at the time. But Extreme Rules, like, even then, from a technical standpoint, might be better than Royal Rumble as far as how it was. No, but like the Royal Rumble, I at least had good editing for the Royal Rumble match. Yeah, it really is a toss up. But I'm gonna have to put Extreme Rules. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it below Royal Rumble. That's where I'm gonna put it. Some people might disagree with me on that, because it really is just an issue of what do you value? Like, what do you value less, incompetence or genericness? Then we get into Over the Limit, which is even worse than Extreme Rules. Of course, starting things off, you have the United States Championship triple threat between Cesaro, Alberto Del Rio, and Curtis Axel. I talked about this a lot off the heels of the Extreme Rules match. You had like a breakdown in the tag team between Del Rio and Axel, or maybe they were working together. No, they had broken up by this point. So, I mean, they were both working towards the common goal, and adding Curtis Axel into this feud does spice things up. But honestly, Cesaro getting the win was the best call. Not really much came out of this matchup. It's just continuing to drag out that Del Rio feud, which at this point I think has gone on too long. With the Extreme Rules match, yeah, you could make the excuse it was the rubber match, so that's theoretically would be the conclusion. But then it continues here to Over the Limit, with Curtis Axel also being thrown into the mix to spice things up. But at the same time, why is Del Rio still getting opportunities? He's now lost twice, and he'll lose a third time here and finally be out of the title picture. But why? Like, why? Why did he need another shot? Wasn't the last match at Extreme Rules, wasn't that definitive enough that he was done? And after this, Cesaro's going to go on his United States Championship Open Challenge, which happens weekly on Monday Night Raw. It was basically my version of the John Cena United States Championship Open Challenge, which had also been going on around this time. So, with Del Rio, and, like, it really showed that I didn't have... It might be a good way of building up Cesaro, the Open Challenge, but at the same time, it clearly shows that I had no real plan for Cesaro as far as, like, these pay-per-view matches would go. Who was going to be the next guy to step up to challenge him? Instead, I just gave a bunch of people smaller scale shots on the weekly episodes of Raw, which, I mean, it's good in that it built up Cesaro. It really built him up as a strong champion, and it also gave opportunities to lesser showcased guys. But at the same time, it doesn't quite have that scale of, like, no individual match has the same scale of, say, a pay-per-view match, except maybe one that comes along in the build-up to Money in the Bank, but I'll get to that later. It's just a lot of legends showing up on occasion, or some guy like a Zack Ryder, an underutilized superstar on the roster, would step up to challenge him. So it wasn't, I mean, the Open Challenge was not a bad concept, and I think it was better than trying to, God forbid, giving Del Rio another shot at the title, or doing a rematch with Curtis Axel or something, because at this point, there just wasn't enough hype around the US title to really make any more pay-per-view matches out of it for a while. So I think it was the right call to make to start off the Open Challenge, but it kind of just shows the weaknesses of this triple threat, and just the weaknesses, I guess, of the US title division as a whole at this point in the game. Then we jump back over to SmackDown when the Wyatt family defends their tag team titles against the Ascension, and finally, after, 192 days, the Wyatt family finally loses the tag team titles. They lose it to the debuting up-and-coming Ascension, which, was putting the belts on the Ascension straight out of the gate the best idea? Probably not, because you got to get a way to, like, build them up. That's just the thing with the Ascension, is that they thrive in being on top. They thrive in looking indestructible, looking unbeatable. That's why in NXT, when they had that massive title reign and they were just defeating challenger after challenger after challenger. They looked intimidating. They looked like an actual threat. But then once they were brought up to, well, even in NXT then, once they lost to the Lucha Dragons, they kind of lost that presence. But still, like, they had enough of it because of their tag team title reign. They had enough of a presence that they could help put over Finn Balor and Hideo Itami in that tag team matchup they had on the one NXT takeover. But then once they go up to the main roster and they don't even get that winning streak out of the gate and they just start losing, then because at that point, when you have a gimmick where you're just unbeatable, where you have a winning streak, when the winning streak is your gimmick, once you lose that, you lose everything. And unless your character has enough depth to it, or there's enough, if you present that loss in a really interesting way, like, for example, one thing that I thought was missed potential on the part of WWE was when they had Bo Dallas get his first loss to, it was just a random loss to R-Truth. But I kind of took a different spin on that with Tyler Breeze, where he was undefeated for so long, but then he lost to Apollo Crews on an episode of SmackDown, or main event rather, and then he snaps, and it adds a new facet to his character because now he's more aggressive. He's no longer undefeated, so some of that arrogance, like the arrogance is still there, but it goes away a little bit. Like, he becomes humbled by losing, but he becomes a lot more furious, a lot more aggressive in the ring, which it's putting a twist on his character because of the loss, which gives that loss importance. Whereas here, like, when the Ascension wins the tag titles, you have to do something with that loss. Like that, but that's the thing. When you give them the belts right out of the gate, then that only makes those expectations even higher. Is that, you know, they come in and they just immediately win the tag team titles. Like, okay, you've put a lot of faith in these guys, given them a lot of build up. But then what's going to happen when they drop the tag titles? So perhaps I didn't really know how I would book the Ascension other than them being champions, just because that was what I was familiar with them being on NXT. And I didn't realize that the WWE would completely drop the ball on their characters. Well, like, you can have a team that is meant to, like, they made their name being winners. This works for individual superstars as well. But then once they lose, you have to do something with those characters. And the problem with the Ascension on the main roster is that WWE did nothing with those characters. They had no character beyond just being indestructible monsters. But I kind of got on a bit of a tangent here. The Ascension defeating the Wyatt family, it was a good decision, even though with the Ascension, the future of them, it's a bit mixed. I mean, they do hold the tag titles for quite some time, which was, obviously, it was a smart call, because with the Wyatt family having the titles for so long, you can't just have the Ascension win, and then the next pay-per-view drop them to the Usos or whatever. Because then, at that point, not only does it devalue them as a team, but because they were the team that defeated the Wyatt family, that devalues the Wyatt family. So, having the Wyatts lose here, it was good. They needed to disappear for a bit. They had gone through their bit with the Shield. That rivalry was over. And with Bray Wyatt being off screen, I didn't really know what I was going to do with the Wyatt family. They kind of needed to be rebranded. I needed to do something different with them, find a different purpose for them, a different way to use them in a storyline. Their time as champions had run its course. I thought it was time to get rid of them, bring in some new blood and some new faces to the tag team division. And in that sense, I think the Ascension was the perfect team, because around that time, I don't know exactly who all my tag teams were, but I'm thinking like New Day and Awesome Truth, and they certainly were not going to win the tag titles. If the Shield had won them, that could have worked, and I maybe could have dragged out the build-up to Seth Rollins' betrayal of Dean Ambrose if they had won. But other than that, there was no other team that like currently existed on the roster that could have overtaken the Wyatt family as like a credible threat. So bringing in the Ascension, I think, was good in that sense, in that it looked like nobody could defeat the Wyatt family, but then these upstarts come in, and they just take them out. On the pay-per-view, they win the tag titles, completely rip the carpet out from under them. So I'd say the match was good. I like this matchup, even if, like, with tag team matches, is always the issue of actually putting together the match. And again, this was AI simulated, so not much to speak of there, but at least from like a thematic standpoint, from a structural standpoint moving forward, the Ascension winning here was the right call, and it was a good match. Very strong point in SmackDown's favor. And of course, we have to undercut that immediately with the Intercontinental title match between Titus O'Neil and Goldust. I already talked about how this matchup falls flat. There was no real investment in the feud on my part, which, if I'm not invested in it, how the heck is anyone watching supposed to get invested in it? It was bad. Titus wins, defeats Goldust, and moves on to the next challenger, which, that's all this... Again, it just pads out his title reign. There's nothing noteworthy from it. Then we have a singles match between Adrian Neville and Bo Dallas, because at this point, they both had debuted, came up from NXT. They were now on the SmackDown roster. Both had gone on this winning streak. I don't remember if they were both undefeated by this point or not, but Bo Dallas at one point was undefeated, and then he lost to, I think Neville had defeated him before this match. So that's what the build-up was that Bo Dallas he was undefeated for a while, but then he lost to Adrian Neville, and then they had a match here. I actually don't really remember the build-up to this match, which I guess just shows how good it must have been if it was so good that my brain has blocked it from my memory. But it was okay. It was a way to get some attention on some new guys. In that sense, it is a self-contained story here, in that it's not a WrestleMania leftover. But then it also builds into the the Sami Zayn Corey Graves match at Payback. So, it's not really a payoff. Neville wins, he defeats Bo Dallas here. And then after the match, Corey Graves assaults Adrian Neville, takes out his leg, injures him for the time being. And then Neville will return for a match with Graves at SummerSlam in 2K16. So, it sets up a future feud there. But it was okay. Get attention on new guys. Put someone new on a pay-per-view for a change. I like that part of it. But, there were two fairly new guys, so you can only get so invested in this matchup because you don't really know much about either of them. Then there is the Divas title match representing Raw, Paige versus Brie Bella. I've already talked about that. Skipping over that. Oh, yeah, Paige wins, of course. But skipping over that, we move on to the main event. No, wait, I skipped the World Heavyweight title rematch. Wow. Dolph Ziggler versus Christian. That happened before the Divas title match. The Divas title was like a bridge between the two title matches. So, Ziggler versus Christian. It is, I believe... Yeah, it's Ziggler who wins. He retains. This is after Christian had turned heel after losing to Ziggler in numerous exhibition matches on Raw, which... I understand what I was going for there. The idea was that Christian could not defeat Ziggler, so he snaps and taps into this darker side of himself, and then he goes on to fight Ziggler, and he would use that power to win. Or, of course, in this case, lose, because he just was not good enough for Ziggler. Because, obviously, Ziggler had just won the title. I'm not going to take it off of him this quickly. But having all of those matches on Monday Night Raw leading up to this pay-per-view title match, you talk about just having a one-off match before the pay-per-view, and how that spoils the build-up. I was very clearly, I had a clear intention behind this, because it's not just one match between the two. They faced off 2 or 3 times, actually, I think, between Extreme Rules and Over the Limit, which it was a key part of the build-up to this feud, was that Christian would lose time and time again and turn heel because he cannot defeat Ziggler. But at the same time, it's still giving away the payoff. Like, Ziggler has beaten him how many times going into the title match? Why should anyone expect Christian to win? The heel turn, I guess, spices it up. So you would think, oh, well, now Christian, this is a new Christian, so maybe he can do it. But he doesn't. And that gets him out of the feud, which was, again, a good decision. Ziggler should have won. But the build-up, I don't think I'm a big fan. Like, I understand what I was going for. It was something different than just the usual, they don't make contact until the pay-per-view. But at the same time, there's a reason why that build-up happens, why two superstars don't face off before the pay-per-view, because it undercuts the payoff. And even though that was kind of the point with this feud, I still am not a big fan. Then there's the main event, CM Punk versus Sheamus for the WWE title. I touched on this during the Extreme Rules. The Barrett Punk match serves basically the same purpose. We're just dragging out Punk's reign a bit, leading up to this match at Payback. So, like, the difference here is that it's not totally meaningless. It's not just, like with Goldust stepping up to face Titus, is that it's not just a filler match where... No, it's more like, not quite like Big Show versus Ryback at the Royal Rumble, where it's just a guy who won a number 1 contenders match. Because at the very least, Goldust was still building towards a match with Cody Rhodes, so him failing to win the Intercontinental title, it still kind of builds into both these characters' feuds between Titus and Darren and Goldust and Cody. But with like Ryback and Big Show, there was nothing there. It was just a filler match. So in that sense, Punk versus Sheamus and Punk versus Barrett are kind of filler matches, but there is a bigger storyline that this is building into, because the Fatal 4-Way match at Payback would not have the same weight if these two matches hadn't happened, because then it would have just been Punk versus Barrett versus Sheamus versus Reigns. There would have been two guys, like Barrett and Sheamus would have just kind of showed up and try to take out Punk. Like, at least this way, they've both tried individually and failed, and that's why they would group up, is that they couldn't do it on their own, so they're going to work together to take out the common enemy. And then Roman Reigns jumps into the mix to protect Punk, but also he wants a shot at the title, so getting on Punk's side also kind of gives him a reason to be there. So it's good build-up for Payback. I'm not saying it's bad, but it is kind of generic, which is just the whole issue with Extreme Rules and Over the Limit, is that they're too generic. I'm going to give the edge to SmackDown on this one, because you've got a new champion in the Ascension, and it was a good move for the future of the series. Punk, Sheamus building up to that match at Payback still, so there's at least something going on there. Neville and Dallas getting a shot on the pay-per-view is again giving an opportunity to some new talent, which is something that Monday Night Raw isn't really doing. And yeah, Titus versus Goldust might have fallen flat, but at least SmackDown, there's more experimenting going on there than with Over the Limit. And you know, now that I look at this, I actually might have to say that Over the Limit was better than Extreme Rules, which is not what I was thinking going into it. Just in history, I was kind of more fond of the build-up for Extreme Rules, but when now that I've become a little more detached to both shows, and I'm just looking at it in a way objectively, like looking at the fundamental flaws and like the fundamental components of each show, I would say that Over the Limit is actually better than Extreme Rules. I know I put Extreme Rules under the Royal Rumble. Over the Limit, I think I'm actually going to put it... Do I put it over No Way Out? Yeah, I'm going to put it over No Way Out. I know that the big storyline with The Undertaker and Cena, it was a big experiment at the time. Something I hadn't really done before, but it was kind of a poorly executed experiment. Whereas with what's going on here at Extreme Rules with the Ascension defeating the Wyatt family, I think that was a well-executed, having the underdog, well, not even the underdogs really, but having the up-and-coming team overthrow the dominant behemoths, and then they disappear for a bit. It really makes the Ascension look credible, and then also giving the opportunity to Neville and Dallas, I think was just a smart move. Whereas No Way Out, there was building stuff there, like Bryan Jericho was one of the high points of No Way Out, but I think, that was more of a drawn-out payoff, so the individual match itself had a little less weight to it. But yeah, I'm gonna put Over the Limit over No Way Out, but not above Elimination Chamber. I don't think there's enough scale to warrant that spot, but it was at least better than Extreme Rules, which is not what I thought initially going into this. I'm now noticing that most of my top-ranked pay-per-views I have given the edge to SmackDown, and I swear this is just a coincidence. I'm not playing favorites. It's not just because usually when SmackDown has a high point, usually Monday Night Raw is kind of doing the same. Like with Eliminate, now it's a mixed bag. Some of them Raw is also doing terribly, but like TLC was kind of balanced between both shows. Survivor Series was also kind of okay. WrestleMania as well had some moments in favor of each show, but like most of the lower, kind of the mid-tier to lower ranked pay-per-views on this list are all Raw, whereas SmackDown is ending up on top, which is interesting. It was not intentional. Of course, I am a SmackDown boy through and through. Like growing up, SmackDown, the blue brand, was my show, mainly just because at the time, like it aired on Friday night, so I could stay up later to watch it as a kid, unlike on Raw on Mondays, which would also run later because it was like 8 to 10 at night versus Raw, which was like 9 to 11, so it was even later, so it was less, but it's not playing into my rankings here, even though it really does look like that, because my top 5 at the moment are all SmackDown, and then below that there's only one pay-per-view, which is WWE 13 Extreme Rules, which is also SmackDown. Everything else below that is Raw, which I think is really interesting, but I don't think that's going to be the case all throughout, but if it is, I think that'd be kind of hilarious. And there's a good reason why I brought that up, because we take a look at Payback now, which was the big turning point for the series, And just looking at the match card here, there are 2 matches that belong to Monday Night Raw. There are 2 non-brand exclusive matches, and then there's like 5 that are SmackDown. So clearly SmackDown is going to get the edge here. I'm just going to throw that out now because not only are there a ton of matches in SmackDown's favor, so it kind of would get it by default, but they're also good matches. Like, there's no real... I don't really have any issues with any of these matchups, quite frankly. They're either giving a good payoff or building up the next challengers, or in the case of the tag title match between the Ascension and the Usos, it actually builds them up. It continues to build the Ascension, because like you wouldn't have the Ascension lose to the Usos after beating the Wyatt family. It makes no sense. And now I'm actually going to start putting footage for any of the relevant matches that I start to talk about here. Although it might not be quite as like concrete with some of the ones that I quickly gloss over. Like when I talk about Paige versus Tamina Snuka, and if I only have so much to say about it, then we'll quickly brush it aside. Yeah, it's gonna kind of vary on how I use the footage. It'll be a work in progress because the only matches that I really think I'll have much to say about, they don't come until like later on. Like I know Money in the Bank has one, Payback kind of has one, but there's not much to comment on as far as spots go. But yeah, the Payback is the first show where, 1, I actually had good footage now because I didn't have to cross-convert everything. 2, I started taking full control. However, there are a couple matches in here, like Ryback versus Rusev, and I think... what was the other one? I think there were 2 matches in particular on this show that were not just me. Like, the AI was definitely involved. I know Ryback versus Rusev was all AI. Some of them might have been me versus the AI. Some of it might have been me versus myself. Not 100% sure which all was which, but the pay-per-views are going to start getting much better from here. Like, we look at the rankings so far, and there's a big toss-up. Like, 2K14 and 2K15 are almost indistinguishable from one another. TLC is still the #1 ranked pay-per-view so far, and I'm almost like, I only have 2K15 pay-per-views to go. And I actually, see, again, I thought that it was going to go chronologically, like the top pay-per-views were going to be from the newer games, but hasn't been the case so far. But this is where you're going to start to understand my bias, or my thought in thinking that, why I think that, because from here on out, things get so much better. The quality improves tremendously from where I had been before. So let's jump into it. The tag team title match, the Ascension versus the Usos, the Ascension win. Not much to say on that matchup. I mostly covered what I wanted to say already. Then you've got Ryback versus Rusev. This is my way of starting to build Ryback back up and into the main event scene. Build him up for the World Heavyweight Championship title match he'll get at SummerSlam. But I'm also trying to put credibility on Rusev here, because Rusev had debuted and he was undefeated, so he was looking powerful. So with Ryback, he's not really in the main event scene yet, but I'd say he's definitely at this upper mid-card status, where I'm not going to have him challenge Cesaro for the US title, because that title is beneath him at this point, because he's already been the Intercontinental Champion for 192 days. He was at WrestleMania, so Ryback at this point, it's time to start kicking him up into the main event. So having him go against Rusev, a guy who looks strong, is definitely on the path to moving into the main event, which he will eventually do. But at this point, he's not quite ready yet. And you might say, well, it was a little too early to have Rusev lose to snap that winning streak of his, because like with the WWE, they had Rusev's winning streak go on for up until Cena beat him at WrestleMania. I think he was undefeated. So they really ran with that. Whereas with me, I snapped it pretty quickly, which I think was to the benefit of Rusev in the end, because I could focus more on his character and less on his streak, which is a problem I've had in the past. It's a problem WWE has had way too many times, because that's why main roster Rusev flopped, is that they had this undefeated streak for him. He loses to Cena, loses all that momentum, but then what did WWE do with him? What did they do with his character? Not much. Like, he was just the big foreign villain. So that was his character, and he the unstoppable foreign villain. That just was his gimmick. He was powerful, and he was foreign, and he was evil. That was the essence of his character. But like, if you give him a loss earlier, at that point, like with the win, when you keep giving a guy wins, he in a way that kind of cushions him. It protects him in that he doesn't necessarily have to be a strong character because he has all these wins to make him look credible. But once you start losing, then you really have to work on that character, or you have to be able to fall back on it, because if you're not like in the records, you're not going to look credible there. If you can lose a couple, well, I mean, it's not that you don't look credible, but you're not going to look like a monster. So at that point, then you need to work on your personality and figure out, well, like, what is your staying power? Because wins, they come and go. Ultimately, what makes a superstar is their character. It's how memorable they are, how well they carry themselves, both in and out of the ring. So giving a guy a loss earlier on, I think it forces them to confront that facet of their character quicker, and it gives them more time to figure out whether or not they're gonna sink or swim. Because when you give a guy a winning streak, let's say with Goldberg, he has this massive winning streak that goes on for ages, and then once he loses, what happens to him? Like, what is his character beyond the fact that he's an unstoppable monster? So then at that point, you've sunk all this time into building the guy up. You think he's gonna be great, but then when he kind of like, maybe not Goldberg is the best example of a guy falling flat, but like, imagine with Rusev, if they had put all this stock into the guy, thinking he was going to be great, giving him all these wins, and then when he loses to John Cena, there's just nothing to him beyond that point. So, you put all your eggs in this one basket, and then when the basket falls and all the eggs break, then not only have you wasted your time building that guy up, you've completely ruined him because he has no character. Like, what do you do with the guy? So, at least here, you give the guy a loss earlier, you're not going to break as many eggs if he fails. So then, at that point, if he doesn't work out, you can move on to someone else, and it's less of a time investment. So having Rusev lose here gave me the chance to figure out what I wanted to do with the guy beyond just a winning streak. And definitely, having Rusev beat Ryback would have been weird, because Ryback is moving into the main event. But if Rusev stops him here, then at that point, Rusev, I mean, basically, he should be the next guy to go into the main event. And that's the issue I kind of had with the Ascension moving forward, is that they jumped into the title picture so soon, but then once they lost the titles to Balor and Itami, where do they go from there? So they kind of just disappeared for a bit. They kind of lost that credibility, whereas with Rusev, if he jumps up there, he's going to have the exact same problem. Okay, you say, well, don't have him lose the world title then. Have him beat the champion. But all that does is just extend the issue. It just puts it off for later. And again, I get into that idea of putting all your eggs in one basket and then having it all break, having it all just crash and burn around you. So rather than, it was just smart to give Ryback the win here. I didn't control this matchup. This one was AI, but I think it was good. I think the AI did a pretty good job with it. There were some interesting spots in there. Ending with a shell shock. Ryback, see, that's the thing. This is something that the AI did at the time that I don't think I could have pulled off as well, is that Ryback hits him with a shell shock, and he has to crawl into the pin, and he just drops his arm over him. If you want to talk about building up Rusev, of making Rusev look good, making him look strong, but also giving Ryback the win, that's how you do it. That was probably the perfect finish this matchup could have had, and I like it. So even though I have bashed the AI on numerous occasions, and I will continue to bash the AI because 99% of the time, this doesn't happen. They don't pull off a moment like this. But they did it here, and that's why I kept it in. Because I had tried to play this match myself, and I kind of had some issues with figuring out what I wanted to do with it. So that's why at Payback, there were a couple matches that I threw it to the AI because I just couldn't really think of anything. So the AI, they did a good job with it. I'm glad that this matchup ended the way it did. Makes Ryback look good, it makes Rusev look good, even though Rusev ends up losing. Because that's typically the thing with these stories, these characters, these journeys, is that you are more interested in the journey than you are in the victories. And in fact, sometimes having a character go down in defeat is more interesting than having them win, because then at that point you expose the flaws of that character, and you really get to see how they progress, how they develop. So, like think of the, we'll say just the Survivor Series match for now. Think of the Team Rollins versus Team Ambrose match. If Ambrose had won there, it would have been satisfying to see him get that win. It would have been satisfying to see him get the win. But when he loses to Rollins, he doesn't manage to overcome him, then I get to push deeper into what is his rock bottom. And once you get to that point, like, when he hits his lowest, how does that affect him? Like, does he continue to push forward to go back at Seth Rollins with all he's got, or does he give up? Or does he turn to the dark side? Does he turn a new leaf, completely flip a switch, blow a gasket, and now he's just this unstoppable monster? So it's an interesting way to explore characters, to figure out what the essence of a character can be. And even then, you can have a superstar lose multiple times, and that continues to play into that journey, which still is ongoing with Dean Ambrose, and I can't say much more on that because, spoilers, I haven't gotten to any of my other story beats yet. But with Rusev, it was better to have him lose here. God, I spent a lot of time on that matchup, so we're going to jump on to Cody Rhodes versus Goldust, the steel cage match. This was fine. It was good. It concluded the feud, and it's a way to give Cody Rhodes a good rub, kind of push Goldust out of relevance, because after this match, I don't think he ever appears on a pay-per-view again. I can't think of any other rivalry he was actually in beyond this point. So it gives the rub. It also fulfills that kind of fantasy aspect of Goldust versus Cody Rhodes, brother versus brother, which WWE had the perfect opportunity to do with Stardust, that whole storyline, but they didn't do it because they suck. WWE sucks by not, we could have had Cody Rhodes versus Goldust at WrestleMania. WWE blew it. But okay, this match, I think I did an okay job with the feud. I could have done better. Like I said, Goldust did not have to get the Intercontinental title shot and over the limit. In the matchup, really, they only faced off once, and this was the payoff, the steel cage match. So I could have done a bit more with the rivalry, but that's okay. Cody Rhodes, the right winner, won in the end. He goes on to the Money in the Bank match at Money in the Bank, obviously. So it was good. Could have been better, but it also could have been a hell of a lot worse. It's honestly, this feud, while maybe a little hollow, still far better constructed than most of the stuff that I had come up with prior. Look at any of my WWE 13 stuff. This is miles above that. And speaking of interesting, cool rivalries, Titus O'Neil versus Darren Young for the Intercontinental Championship. And of course, it is Titus O'Neil who defeats Darren Young here. It was a good back and forth clash. And again, with Del Rio and Cesaro, I talked about the idea of the rubber match. With Titus and Darren, you had their matchup way back prior to King of the Ring in 2K14, where they fought to just kind of fill that spot, and it was Darren who won. That plays into Titus O'Neil's insecurities, his inferiority complex, which sparks... I think there might have also been a match on SmackDown that had happened before they split. Or maybe it was before Elimination Chamber. I don't quite remember. But maybe I'm making that matchup up. But then Titus O'Neil turns on Darren. They get the match at Elimination Chamber. Titus wins. So now they're even at one apiece. Here comes the rubber match at Payback. And this one's had some build-up. Yeah, it was a little drawn out, more than it needed to be. But we still had build-up there. They had their Elimination Chamber match, obviously. WrestleMania, they were in the Fatal 4-Way, so it was continuing to build towards it. It was very clearly Darren Young's motivation to take the title away from Titus O'Neil, take away the Intercontinental title, and kind of snap him out of this. Kind of try to either force him to realize his mistakes and try to reform the Primetime Players, or completely sever that bond entirely and just overcome Titus O'Neil. Just prove that he's not as good as he thinks he is. But it was Titus who won in the end. Keep building to that underdog story with Darren Young, and keep building up Titus. This is where Titus O'Neil's title reign is going to finally start to hit its stride. The match with Ryback, kind of pointless. Match with Goldust, kind of pointless. At the very least, I guess it does give him victories. So now he's held the title for 3 months, counting this match at Payback. So he's starting to come into his own. Money in the Bank, it's a bit more of the standard give a contender a shot match, but that was better than what I did with Goldust at least. It doesn't kind of counteract any feuds that I was trying to make. And then we're going to get to SummerSlam where things really start to escalate for Titus O'Neil. So we're laying the groundwork, we're slowly getting there. It's another good match for SmackDown. Then we jump back to Raw for a World Heavyweight Championship triple threat match between Dolph Ziggler, Daniel Bryan, and Edge. So what this match was doing, Edge kind of steps into Christian's place. I believe in the promo I used for it, it was Christian worked so hard to get the world title, and then you took it away from him, just like that, just when he was finally starting to get what he wanted. So Edge, as Christian's best friend, steps up in his place to try to take the title from Ziggler. Daniel Bryan jumps in here because it was a way to just kind of get someone new into the mix, and I really didn't know what to do with Bryan before the Money in the Bank match, which obviously Daniel Bryan does partake in that. He wins, and that sets up the title match with CM Punk at SummerSlam. So I was kind of spinning my wheels with him. He had beaten Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. I didn't have anything else to do with him since then. So that's kind of a weak part of the feud with Punk, that journey where Bryan is just kind of doing nothing. After he beats Lesnar, he kind of had time off to recover, but that would have made more sense after the Royal Rumble. It was okay. I mean, it could have been better, but it's not bad necessarily. So he gets a shot at the World Heavyweight title here. Maybe like it could have been building towards a champion versus champion match, which would have been interesting, different than... Because see, even if I had done that, where neither world title was defended at SummerSlam, would have been weird, but still would have been better than Dean Ambrose in a 6-man tag against The Undertaker and Daniel Bryan and Kane. Like, at least then, the champions would have been doing something. Like, a champion versus champion match is a big deal. That's why it happened at Night of Champions, but that was a title versus title match. But having it, like, at that point, with the scale of the feud, if Bryan had become the world champion and had fought Punk at SummerSlam for, like, just a champion versus champion match, non-title, I think it would have worked with the scale of the feud, at least. I think that would have warranted it, because if you really want to find out who is the best in the world, having your two top champions face off would have been cool. Although I'm glad I didn't take that approach. Instead, I was able to get multiple storylines out of it, having Ziggler retain the title here. This is going to lead to the match at this is going to lead to the match at Money in the Bank, the TLC match between Ziggler and Edge. So getting Bryan into the mix here kind of prevents it from being repetitive, because then it would have just been Ziggler versus Edge and Ziggler versus Edge again, just coming off of Ziggler versus Christian and Ziggler versus Christian again. So it was better to do it this way. Throw Bryan in there, gives Bryan something to do until Money in the Bank, and it spices up the feud a tad. Then there is the WWE Championship #1 contenders match between John Cena and Mark Henry. Not really much to say about this match. This one was definitely AI controlled, but Cena defeats Mark Henry. It was a good way to have, I guess, the two, because at this point we've got Barrett, Sheamus, and Roman Reigns all fighting CM Punk for the WWE title in the main event. So obviously that feud was going to end with Payback. So I had to find somebody else to step up. And it's very clear with the fact that I did this that I wanted CM Punk to win the main event, which he did do. Whereas maybe I could have set up like a singles match between Punk and Reigns or something, but that clearly was not on the table at this point. You can see now that I'm starting to plan things out for the future. I'm starting to think of multiple different storylines I could make out of individual matches rather than just going from just randomly coming up with stuff on the fly. Like, let's say if this had been WWE 13, for example, no, that's a bit too chaotic. If this was 2K14, for example, then, or even early 2K15, some random person would have won the main event. I might have gotten lucky and it was Punk, but it probably would have been like Barrett or Roman Reigns or something. But let's say best case scenario for that instance. It's obviously not the ultimate best case scenario, but let's say Roman Reigns had won. So then it would have been Punk versus Reigns, the rematch at Money in the Bank, which in and of itself is kind of okay. Reigns had the build-up for it. It was too early to give him the title, but he had the build-up, so if he had won, it would have been fine. Like, it would have been acceptable, just not the best decision. So then it would have been Reigns versus Punk at Money in the Bank instead of Punk versus Cena. Now, at that point, I could still possibly try to... I mean, I guess I still could have thrown in the Bray Wyatt twist where he takes out Reigns, but it doesn't make Punk... Like, the idea behind Punk versus Bryan is that these two are the best at what they do, and they're facing off to determine who truly is the #1 guy in the world of professional wrestling. So, having Punk on the pay-per-view before he would tentatively fight Bryan at SummerSlam, having him lose, or having him win through controversy, wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense. It would kind of contradict the message that the feud had been... It would have contradicted the theme of the feud between Punk and Bryan. So, having him go all out against John Cena and overcome the man, that's far better than having him defeat Reigns because Bray Wyatt cost Reigns the match. I mean, it would have still made Reigns look strong, I suppose, but it would have made Punk look weaker, which would be counterintuitive to what that feud was representing. And by doing it this way, Roman Reigns can then join the Money in the Bank ladder match and add a little more credibility to that. Because you do have guys like Cesaro and Daniel Bryan in there, but Roman Reigns also just third man to throw into the mix, and then you wonder, well, who really is going to win this Money in the Bank match? I mean, all signs would point to Bryan. Bryan winning was a bit predictable, I will admit that, but even then, you do have a guy like Cesaro who's hot on the heels of his U.S. title championship, open challenge, that's the word. So, I mean, Cesaro, it was believable that he could have won. Roman Reigns had been built up crazy, so maybe not as crazy as Cesaro or Bryan, but Reigns had been built up, so it was believable that maybe he could have pulled it off. It's just a way to throw in some more red herrings, and I think it strengthened the quality of that match in particular. So, having Cena versus Henry here does kind of give away that Punk would win, that's my intention. And having Cena beat Henry, I think is a smart call. It's a way of knocking Henry out of the main event scene for good, because at this point, he had been a former world champion, kind of the guy who carried SmackDown for a little bit. Like, after Sheamus fell, it was Henry up until, really, WrestleMania, because he had the impact in the triple threat match. He was using his rematch clause, so Henry had been in the main event scene for quite some time. And then when the titles swapped shows and CM Punk ended up taking the main event spot, Henry was in that battle royal, but it was a good way to kind of phase him out, show that the new guard was starting to take over. But even then, you had guys like Barrett and Sheamus who had been around for quite some time, but they were jumping back into the fold. So Henry was losing his place, but at the same time, he hadn't really been overthrown. He hadn't really been knocked out of that top spot completely. It was just it was a battle royal, so it was just kind of chance that he was gone. Nobody actually had to go through him to move up. So with John Cena, yeah, he was a main eventer before, a former WWE champion, but at least having him go through Mark Henry, I don't want to say passing of the torch because both guys are veterans in this case, but it's a way of giving the new blood coming in from Monday Night Raw, giving them a good rub, really building up the scale of that Punk versus Cena matchup, which in and of itself, as a concept, already had a ton of build-up because Punk versus Cena, it was a match I had done multiple times in Universe mode. It could have been the main event of WrestleMania, which in this sense, I guess I'm glad that it wasn't the main event of WrestleMania because we would have been rehashing it here, and I think the outcome would have been basically the same because Punk, of course, wins. So if Cena had been in the main event at WrestleMania, I would have booked this differently. Maybe Mark Henry would have stepped up at Money in the Bank. Ultimately, I would have been okay with either Cena or Henry stepping up, but I think Cena was the better man to do it, especially considering the type of match that Money in the Bank ended up having, where, Mark Henry he works a slower match, because he's just a bigger guy. He's a powerhouse. So, I couldn't have done as many high spots as what I did with Punk versus Cena, which could have, that's the problem with the timing of all of this, is that if this was before, just the year of the recent Slammy Awards, it did not work in favor of Punk versus Cena, because at the time, I know a lot of people were really hyped about the Punk versus Cena match. Definitely was a match of the year candidate, but the problem with when it came out was that then I had to go through 2K16, which really every show on 2K16 eclipsed most of 2K15 in every way. So it was really difficult at that point to look back on Punk versus Cena and see it for the true greatness that it was at the time, especially considering that at the time, this matchup between Punk, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me conclude Payback, then I'll jump into Money in the Bank. So, another great match is, of course, the main event, Fatal 4-Way, Punk, Barrett, Sheamus, and Reigns. The build-up to this matchup was really good. It had been going on since, the fallout of WrestleMania. Of course, this wasn't connected to WrestleMania, other than that Punk had won the title, but it wasn't like Reigns fought Punk at WrestleMania. Now we're getting back to that. They're getting another chance to square off. There's none of that. This is a new thing. This was really the ultimate payoff coming out of this pay-per-view, because Titus versus Darren will continue. Cody versus Goldust didn't have the same scale. Ziggler Edge will continue. Those are the real concrete examples of feuds that had been built up. So, oh my god, I've completely skipped the non-brand exclusive matches. Okay, Paige versus Tamina. So, Paige loses to Tamina. Was not a good decision. Tamina should not have won that match. I guess, technically, from, the actual wrestling itself, the match is okay, but Tamina winning was bad, and it just kind of goes to show that my future with the Divas division was kind of directionless. So that fell flat. Then you had Corey Graves versus Sami Zayn, another non-brand exclusive match. It was a good one. Ended up in a no contest, or double... I forget what the technical ruling of it was. If it was a double countout or... No, I think it was a no contest. Like, both got knocked out or something. So... it's obvious why I did that. I didn't want Corey Graves to lose. I didn't want Sami Zayn to lose, because neither man really could afford the loss. They were both fairly new to the series. They're both getting built up. So they both put on this impressive performance, and they both lose. But that's kind of 50-50. I don't think it had the same effect that maybe I wanted it to. Because really, I was building up Corey Graves as a bit of a monster. Like he had injured Adrian Neville, and he was going through and just taking people out. Nobody could stop him. But that's why Sami Zayn stepped up, because he was Neville's friend, and so he would kind of step up to avenge him. So having Zayn lose doesn't really work, because he's an underdog, so him losing might have been okay, but he's fairly new to the series at this point, so hasn't been enough to establish him, like establish a couple of wins to then show that, you know, when it comes down into the clutch moments, he can't get it done. Like, to do that effectively, you first have to show the guy getting wins in the first place. But Sami didn't have that. So this matchup, in a way, was a lose-lose. Like, I made the match to make both guys look good, but at the same time, nobody really could lose. So it just ends in this double count-out. Nobody looks overly strong coming out of it. I wouldn't necessarily... I don't know if I would say that it makes both men look weak, because they're getting showcased on a pay-per-view, which neither man had at this point. Technically, Graves did show up at Over the Limit, but he wasn't in, like, a competitive role. He wasn't active in a match or anything. He just showed up and attacked Neville. Unlike with Sami Zayn, who just hadn't made a pay-per-view appearance at all. So, nobody really could lose this match, and that kind of lessens the impact of it. But it's non-brand exclusive, so... Because Corey Graves is SmackDown, Sami Zayn's Raw, so... I guess nobody benefits or loses from it. So it's 50-50 for both brands, just like the match itself for both characters. And now moving back to the main event, which, like I said, it was a good match. The build-up to it was strong. I think the payoff was strong, because you have Roman Reigns do that spot where he dives over the top rope and takes out Sheamus. So Reigns doesn't lose. Like, he takes himself out while also taking Sheamus out of the match. So then CM Punk gets to put away Wade Barrett with the Anaconda Vice, force him to tap out. This kind of harkens back to Extreme Rules, where Punk and Barrett, it was kind of where the feud all started. And that was ultimately where the feud would end, with Punk forcing Barrett to tap out in the center of the ring, again, retaining his title. It's like with the Fatal 4-Way with Titus with the Intercontinental title, only there's no rematch where Reigns now has to fight Punk because he was the former champion. Like with Ryback, he lost, and he could have exited clean, and like he wasn't pinned, so he would have still looked strong. But no, we have to do the rematch instead. Here, Reigns loses, but he's not the one pinned. He's not involved in the decision, and the whole reason why he was taken out of the match to begin with was because he took himself out. He sacrificed himself to get rid of Sheamus. So he goes out in a powerful way and doesn't take the pin, which also helps him look powerful. There wasn't really much else I could say with this matchup to do it better, because, I mean, it's obviously like you have the alliance between Punk and Reigns, get a bit of a stare down between them. I mean, if this had been a matchup that I was making nowadays, obviously there would have been more singles clashes, but almost the problem of that, with the way that the game works now, where superstars just kind of roll out of the ring, is that you can't really focus on that kind of four-man action like I could in 2K15. So it makes the match more distinct, I feel, because all four men are constantly on screen, well, except for, of course, the end of the match where Reigns takes himself out. But there's no real heavy editing on it, which sometimes can slow the pacing of the match down. Like, imagine if I could have done the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match at WrestleMania, but without cutting between different singles matches. Like, if I could have had everybody on screen, or have, like, a couple of different people on screen, like, have two teams on screen at once instead of just the one. Or, like, instead of 2 or 3 people on screen, have maybe 4 to 6. So, like, maybe not everybody who's in the match, but have something going on rather than just... Because here's the thing. With that type of editing, you have to cut from... like you're cutting from different things, so you only have one thing on screen at a time. So sometimes you run the risk of cutting when you cut from one thing to another, you kind of just put that other match on pause, which is why you have to show some sort of progress between the two. I know at Extreme Rules I experimented with split screen for that Fatal 4-Way, so both were happening at the same time simultaneously. That's kind of difficult to structure in and of itself, and at that point then it's tough to not just call the action from my point of view, but to follow it, because you have two things happening on either side of the screen, so you gotta kind of look back and forth, and while you're watching one, you might miss something on the other. So there's no real perfect solution, because if you have everybody on screen, it's chaotic and much more difficult to keep track of. But at the time of Payback, it was fine, because I hadn't really taken much control of the action at this point, so it felt really strong compared to what had happened before. Maybe not as strong as some things that would come later, but in that sense, it's a very clear time capsule match where you see my transition from controlling basically nothing other than kind of booking to controlling everything, matches, the booking, all aspects of the show. So in that sense, this Fatal 4-Way has a type of pacing, a type of quick-fire action that none of my current matches will have, just because my style of production has changed. So if I had to recommend like a match to go back and watch from Payback, I'd say watch this Fatal 4-Way. Like, I know I recommend Payback as the place to start, because that's where my style started to shift, so you can really kind of see the early traces of my new production style. And this Fatal 4-Way match, I think, is perhaps the strongest showcase of that. So if you don't actually want to go back and watch the whole Payback pay-per-view, watch this Fatal 4-Way. It's not too drawn out, like, it's not a super grandiose match like a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania, but it's good enough. You've got 4 men in the ring. There's a lot going on. I think it's a good match, like, to kind of get an idea of where I started to get better. So in a way, where my second origin in universe mode is, because that's how I view Payback. When my style changed, it was like a new way of approaching universe mode for me. So I consider it a second origin, in that everything beyond that was different than what came before, which is why when I have to rank Payback on the list of pay-per-views, I am putting it above TLC without question. I know that TLC really did a good job with the ladder matches, like having the stipulations involved and really delivering on the payoff, like having a really strong conclusion to these feuds. But at the same time, those feuds were kind of weak. There wasn't a lot of substance to them, like the Undertaker-John Cena feud. I've poked a ton of holes in that feud over the course of Raw vs. SmackDown, over the course of Behind the Universe as a whole, whereas with Payback, everything is smaller scale, and not everything on this show is necessarily executed well. Like, there are a couple issues I had with, like, Cody Rhodes versus Goldust, or the World Heavyweight Championship Triple Threat, but the payoffs are there, and I think they deliver stronger than, like, the feuds going into it were at least a little bit better. Because with the thing with the Undertaker-Cena rivalry is that it's contrived. It's very confusing to follow at times, and in some ways I backpedal on certain ideas I had established in the beginning by the time that whole feud is said and done. At least with Payback, everything's kind of straightforward. There aren't many contradictions that exist there that hadn't taken place like a while back, and I've since had time to kind of fix. So yeah, I don't think it's very difficult to rank Payback above TLC, because even then, TLC had a lot of problems beyond just the feuds were kind of iffy going into it. There were certain matches that were just bad, that kind of dragged the whole pay-per-view down. Payback doesn't really have a weak match per se. Like, I know Paige vs. Tamina, I would say, is the weak point of the show, with maybe Corey Graves and Sami Zayn kind of falling in right behind it. Then maybe the Ascension and the Usos for being a little forgettable. But at least then I'm kind of experimenting with stuff. That's just the nature of this pay-per-view. It's very experimental, because I'm just finding this new style. Like, not just a new production style, but with the thing with Corey Graves and Sami Zayn, having a no contest, that's not something I had done before. Like, intentionally making a no contest. And even though maybe not the greatest finish, it's a good way of experimenting with a concept if I wanted to do more no contests in the future. Like, if I would eventually, look for more fishy finishes without, like, botching it and or making it like a super aggravating false finish, or not false finish, but like a screwy finish, a screw job, basically. Stuff like that, or no contest, something not ending conclusively, definitively, just having a dirty finish. This show does a lot, and maybe I'm a bit biased because it does hold a very special place in my heart, being that second origin. But yeah, I have to say it's the best pay-per-view so far. And again, yeah, it goes to SmackDown because 5 SmackDown matches, 2 Raw matches, it's no contest. But don't get too comfortable now because Money in the Bank is up next. And I'm just gonna, again, we're gonna spoil it right off the bat. Money in the Bank surpasses Payback. Because here's the thing, with Payback, that's, like I said, it's the second origin. It is just the beginning. I'm only laying the groundwork for what things are going to be moving forward. Money in the Bank, it's another very experimental pay-per-view. The Money in the Bank ladder match, which I'm just going to jump right into. I know it doesn't kick off the show, but I'm going to start with it because the Money in the Bank match, it's a completely different style of editing that I had not really experimented with before. Because for the most part, like the Fatal 4-Way that I just talked about for Payback, everyone is on screen at once. I didn't even really attempt to edit things together. It was more so I played a hand in the matchup. I might have played as 1 or 2 superstars just to kind of control it as far as the action goes. Whereas with Money in the Bank, I actually had to plan out where superstars would be at any given time and when they would, like, I had to figure out, like, select who was going to jump in at what time. And in a way, like the way it starts out with Curtis Axel making the entrance and just grabbing the ladder right off the bat, it's not the strongest beginning because then everyone else makes their entrances, which is like, why would they make entrances? Why wouldn't they just all run down to the ring at once? Obviously, I can't show 5 guys running on screen at once because, video game limitations. But still, the way that I came up with it, it's a little, like, certain things you just can't really work around with a video game. So it was a creative beginning to the match, a creative way to start things off in one-on-one situations. And at that point, that's where things are going to continue to go from there, is that it's just one-on-one, maybe having 3 men on screen at one given time. But it really segmented everything off. Like, you had Curtis Axel show up, then Daniel Bryan came down to the ring to stop him. Both men took each other out with, like, that back suplex off the ladder. And then you get time for Reigns' entrance, but before he can really do anything, Graves drop kicks him from behind. That spot, the drop kick into the apron, that was such a cool move that I loved that Corey Graves had. I was never really able to follow up on it because, really, you think about it, I don't know if the game still works like that, where you can kick somebody and they hit an object and they just fall into it like that. It always looked cool in 2K15, but at the same time, how often can you set that up? Like, how often is a guy going to have their back turned to you, facing the apron, that you can drop kick them into it? It was a very tough move to pull off at times. I think Graves used it. I can think of at least 3 times that he used it. One obviously being at, actually, it might have only been twice, because he used it once against Zayn leading up to Money in the Bank. No, it was leading up to Money in the Bank, I think he used it. So that might have been a Payback. So yeah, there might have been 3, because he might have used it in the rematch with Sami Zayn on Main Event. But either way, Corey Graves, that apron dropkick looks cool, but with the way that 2K16 and later 2K17 worked, I don't know if that spot's even possible anymore. Just because it was just kind of the nature of the game where, like, now if you kick them, they might just fall to the ground and just kind of push themselves away from the apron. You know how that works. Like, when people will get near an object and instead of, like, running into it, like, if you're not throwing somebody at something, if you just bump them and they happen to fall in that direction, like, if you drop kick a guy up against a ring post, they're not going to bounce off the ring post like they do when you throw it. They're just going to kind of fall to the side or fall in front of it. So I don't know if it's even possible. It was a cool thing. But then, like, you had, of course, then that breaks off into Reigns versus Graves, who Reigns spears Graves through a barricade that takes him out for a while. So, yeah, I had to figure out clever ways to take people out of the action and then figure out, like, okay, when would it be reasonable for this guy to come back in? So, like, you have the back suplex that takes out Axel and Bryan, then they're out of action for a while. This gives time for everyone else to make their entrances. Cody Rhodes, Cesaro, they square off in the ring. Then I have to figure out, where do I put them at ringside so they're not going to be on camera? And I had to worry about cropping the shot so it wouldn't, like, with when Cesaro and Rhodes are in the ring, I had to zoom in on them, because if I didn't, then you would have seen the empty barricade where Reigns and Graves should have been, where Reigns would spear Graves through the barricade. So I had to crop that out so you could suspend your disbelief into thinking that they're actually there, like the action's actually happening. And then I had Bryan versus Axel at the base of the ring, so they wouldn't even appear on screen. And then it's just a matter of figuring out where do people go. Having a guy do a suicide dive to the left side of the ring because somebody had been thrown out there. And then Cesaro swinging everybody is always cool. Reigns hitting multiple spears, I think was what because, like, building up to this match, I also did some cool things. Like, I was working on a top 10 video, like top 10 episodes of Main Event, which I don't know if I'm going to publish or not, because I haven't really had the time to do the editing for it, and I haven't really been motivated to edit it together, honestly. But there's one episode leading up to it, where there's a 6-man tag between all 6 Money in the Bank participants. And honestly, that episode still holds up. Like, obviously the match that precedes it is it falls flat, to say the least. But if you go back and just watch that matchup, even not the match, just like skip ahead to the end of the match if you really don't want to watch it, if you're short on time. But what happens after the match is cool, because then the fights break down and Cesaro it just leads to Cesaro hitting everybody with some variation of the European uppercut, and then hitting him with a Cesaro swing. So I revisited that for Money in the Bank, only this time it was Reigns hitting the spear. And I've said this before, my editing style, just the way I produced this matchup, was inspired by Delzinski's SNME Money in the Bank ladder match, which he recently redid the Money in the Bank ladder match and made it more polished. I mean, the way that everything flows together is nicer, but that's got to be nostalgia, I'd say, but I was really fond of that SNME Money in the Bank ladder match. The way everything was edited together, it was different, something that no one was really doing at the time, and it forced me to step up my game and take a different approach to this Money in the Bank ladder match. So the fight goes on. Roman Reigns gets taken out by Bray Wyatt. I think Axel got speared by Reigns beforehand, and that's what took him out. Cody Rhodes got hit with... what happened to him? I don't remember exactly how everybody got taken out. This is where I can put things on screen now. But it was just a good match. And then it boils down to... Well, then, of course, there's the fake out where Reigns gets taken out by Wyatt. The lights black out. And then Corey Graves is climbing up the ladder. Cesaro jumps in, takes him out. I mean, the fact that he would hit that neck breaker from the top rope and then get back up is kind of weird. But that's just the nature of the game. It was the way that stupid finisher worked, and I guess I didn't figure out how to make it work, because it depends. Like, what other finisher would I have given him? Like an attitude adjustment? He's not John Cena. Yeah, it's just a little weird to kind of plan that stuff out, but it was a high impact move meant to get rid of Graves. Then Cesaro climbs, Bryan jumps in, they battle it out for a while. Honestly, the payoff to the match was a bit drawn out. I don't think Bryan and Cesaro had to go back and forth for that long. It's a little tough to suspend your disbelief for that Bryan would keep getting up after continuously getting knocked down. But Bryan gets up, knocks Cesaro out of the match, off the ladder rather, and then grabs the briefcase and wins the Money in the Bank ladder match. This obviously setting up the inevitable championship match at SummerSlam, which we'll get into on the next part. So that was Money in the Bank. It was a really strong matchup. Definitely some weird editing moments with it because I was getting used to that style. This was really the first chance that I had to experiment with multiple people. Like a 6-man ladder match, you got to keep track of 6 guys. I definitely think that I did it better in the WrestleMania match because you don't have that contrived beginning where they come down to the ring one-on-one. There are just certain aspects that I did better in the WrestleMania ladder match, but then you could also say there are certain aspects I did better in this Money in the Bank match. It kind of comes down to preference. And because this was the beginning, it was kind of more I was laying out the strategies, the editing strategies that I would later use to edit these multi-man matches, whereas with WrestleMania, I had already kind of fallen into my stride with that, so you could maybe see some of my patterns, my techniques that I often would use. And I might as well just wrap up non-brand exclusive matchups now. The Divas title match between Tamina, Paige, and Emma. It was fine. Like, it would have been better if Paige had retained at Payback, and maybe Tamina wouldn't have been necessary to be in this matchup, but I could have spun the match at Payback differently to make this work. But Paige wins it back, which at that point, Tamina had won the title. I should have just stuck with Tamina. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to happen, but I think I might have done a couple of recordings of this matchup, and I ended up going with the Paige victory just because the match was the cleanest. There was one spot that I think got cut out that was in one of my original takes where Emma's up on the top rope, and I think, no, this might have made it in the final version. I don't remember or not. If it did, it'll be on screen. But where Emma's up on the top rope and Paige, like, kicks her off the top rope to the floor, and then that sets up the victory. I don't remember if that's what ended up happening or not, but, I mean, the match was okay from, like, a technical standpoint. Not too memorable. Nothing like the Money in the Bank the Money in the Bank ladder match. You can tell I've been doing this for, like, an hour and a half, because now my words are starting to go. But we're almost there. So, yeah, Tamina wins. This matchup kind of fell flat as far as, like, implication it would have. Paige won, not Tamina. But still, this matchup kind of fell flat in the implications it would have for the future, because Paige does go on to retain the title at SummerSlam, but then the Divas division ends at Night of Champions. So it's like, what? I knew that I wasn't going really anywhere with this division. And I think it was the smart decision to cut it off, like I said in one of the previous parts of this. But, it still doesn't make me happy about the match that we got here. And now we can jump into the SmackDown side of things, where Titus O'Neil defends his Intercontinental title against Tyson Kidd, who was kind of a dark horse going into this. He had a number one contenders triple threat match against Chris Jericho and Jack Swagger on an episode of Main Event building into this. So he was the underdog. He wasn't really the guy I expected to be the number one contender. I think I was initially banking on Chris Jericho winning that title match, because it was another way to build credibility for Titus. Have him go over Chris Jericho, have him go over a veteran. But instead, Tyson Kidd won and came in as this underdog, so that's what I ran with. Titus, of course, ends up retaining, as he would have done with Chris Jericho anyway. So it was at least another good opponent. The fact that Tyson Kidd was an underdog, just kind of coming out of nowhere, I think it does build a bit into the standard guy wins the number one contenders match and gets a title shot. Like, at least there, he's the underdog. He hadn't really been in that title picture to begin with, so there's a bit of investment there as you see Tyson Kidd get a shot that prior to this point he really wouldn't have had any opportunity. He wouldn't have had any other opportunities to get this shot, so it's cool to see him get the opportunity. That at least is a bit of a redeeming factor to what otherwise would have been just a generic title match. Titus retains. It was good for SmackDown. Definitely not a detriment, even though maybe it could have been stronger than, like, maybe there could have been more of a personal investment in this match, but it wasn't bad. It was okay. Acceptable. Maybe even a little on the good side, but just not great. We're going to jump back to Raw now as we have Christian versus Ryback. This was another way to kind of revisit that old rivalry where Christian was the Intercontinental Champion. He dropped it to Ryback back in 2K14. Here we had Ryback, now the new face on Raw. Christian, the former world champion, also brought over to Raw. This was another way to just keep building Ryback into the main event scene, get him another victory over a credible opponent, which he does get here. Ryback defeats Christian. The match was okay. I think there was a spot where Christian might have put Ryback through the announce table and then tried to win by countout, or maybe he threw him into the ring and Ryback kicked out. Or maybe it was Ryback put Christian through the announce table and just destroyed him, which might have been what happened. Either way, Ryback came out of this matchup looking strong. The veteran Christian puts over the up-and-coming megastar that was supposed to be Ryback until he was cut from the 2K17 roster, but I've talked about that issue in the past before, and I'll revisit it again later when it actually comes up. But it was a good match. Nothing really wrong with it. It was kind of like the Titus O'Neil, Tyson Kidd situation, except this is non-title, so I feel a bit stronger about this match, that it did better because it's not just challenger fights a champion. Because it's not a title match, there is a personal investment to that. What's happening with my voice? So already this pay-per-view is off to a good start, and it will continue to roll into bigger, better things as we jump into the Triple H versus Seth Rollins match. Now this one was by far, at the time, like, you want to talk about throwing everything at the wall, just making it as high stakes of a match as possible. That's what this matchup was, as far as execution goes, because you had all these weapons involved. It was no holds barred, so You had people hitting finishers on, like Seth Rollins delivered a curb stomp on the outside to Triple H. There was like, I think he stole the pedigree is how he won the match. And this was my way of giving Seth Rollins the pedigree because he defeated Triple H and stole it from him rather than what WWE did where Triple H kind of passed it down to him, which I think that was a good way to take it as well. But because they had done that, I wanted to do something different. So, and I had already established that Triple H didn't like the Shield. I forget how Hunter got back involved in things. I think it was something about it was tied into the way that Stephanie McMahon was. I mean, I covered it in a Pretend It Never Happened episode, the build up to this match. So the build up wasn't that great. There was pre-existing tensions there, which worked, but the whole thing with Stephanie, it was just a contrived storyline to begin with, so it was okay. But the thing with this matchup, you might look at it with how much I threw into this matchup. It was a long match. I think it almost went on for like half an hour, maybe 20 minutes was like the minimum. But it went on for really long. There was a lot of high spots involved, so you might think, well, because of how high stakes this matchup was, how do you possibly top that? The answer to that is you do the same thing but do it better, or rather you pull back on that. You don't go for as many high spots, as many weapon shots, and instead focus on crafting a story out of it. In this sense, it shows that these two guys were just going out there willing to basically kill each other. Like they were holding nothing back. So it really did have that more of a brawl, a fighting sense to it, rather than a technical wrestling match. But in that sense, there's a reason why I look back on CM Punk versus John Cena as the better match, like why I look at that as such a strong match, and kind of overlook Triple H versus Seth Rollins, because in that sense, Triple H versus Seth Rollins doesn't really have a lot of direction. It's just me jumping from chair shot to ladder shot to diving off the ladder to curb stomp on the outside to frog splash in the ring to pile driver to pedigree. It's just jumping around. There's not like a cohesive narrative through line to follow in this match. It's just spot after spot after spot after spot after spot. So I do think it was a good match for the time. It was there was, of course, just the high stakes, all the experimenting with figuring out throwing in all these high spots. It was a chance for me to figure out what worked and what didn't, and how I could try to extend the times of my matches moving forward, like try to build them out, increase the stakes. So like, I don't think a match like CM Punk versus Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania would not have been possible if it wasn't for me experimenting here. More specifically, I'd say the 60-minute Iron Man match wouldn't have been possible if not for my experimenting here. But I would not say that Triple H versus Seth Rollins was the highlight of the show. If I had to look at like the two most memorable, the three. If you want to talk about the three most memorable matches on this show, that would be Punk versus Cena at number 1, Money in the Bank at number 2, Triple H versus Rollins at number 3. It was good, really good for the time, but it was just throwing a lot into it. It kind of went a little overboard. So let's talk about that WWE title match. It's weird though, because, I actually forgot. The Ziggler-Edge match was really good too, so that might rank above Triple H Rollins. So Rollins-Triple H might be fourth most memorable on the card, which it seems like a slight against it, but that's just because there was so much going on with this show. So many good things happening here. But anyways, moving back to the WWE title match, it's kind of weird that it didn't main event the show in that it's the matchup that I remember the most, but the build-up going into it just wasn't as strong. It didn't warrant the high stakes, because you think about it, this is Money in the Bank, a pay-per-view. It's a gimmick pay-per-view. That's what it is. So you have the Money in the Bank ladder match. So a better way to conclude the show was with the TLC match between Ziggler versus Edge. So I'm not saying that Punk Cena should have been the main event, but with the way the match played out, it did feel like a main event. The build-up to it was just kind of, again, it was just a guy wins a number 1 contenders match and gets a shot. But here, you have the pre-established storyline between CM Punk and John Cena. Because if you recall back to 2K14, it was John Cena who ended up with the last laugh over Punk. They had that pay-per-view match at SummerSlam. Punk just really couldn't get one over on Cena for the longest time. And then Cena lost the title going into WrestleMania. He lost it in the chamber. Punk ended up jumping into his place And you did have a match where... Oh my god, I remembered that dumb match. That dumb match where Cena wanted Punk's WrestleMania spot or whatever, and Punk defended it. I can't believe that I did that. I hate when the Royal Rumble spot gets put in jeopardy as often as it does, because now it's like a yearly thing. Every time somebody wins the Royal Rumble, and then they gotta defend it. They gotta defend it against somebody. So I did that in 2K15, and I don't like that I did that, but I did it, and it built into the Cena-Punk rivalry again, because on that instance, it was Punk who won. But still, you have kind of this tally of matches where it's very, very back and forth, very balanced between the two. So now that Cena and Punk are both on SmackDown, Punk able to defeat Henry, step up to fight the dominant champion that CM Punk had been, and it was a great way to cap off the feud. The feud itself might not have been that great. It's not quite the same level of like long form storytelling, because in that sense it was just match, just whenever they would happen, but creating a narrative out of those recurring matches, unlike with Punk versus Bryan, where there was a narrative going through, like it was an ongoing narrative. There wasn't just a sequence of matches that I would just have the opportunity to connect a narrative throughout, like in retrospect. That one was very clearly intentional, but it worked out here. Punk versus Cena, it was great. Definitely a high point for SmackDown. Then you have the tag team title match, the Ascension versus the Usos. It's a rematch from Payback. This is the weakest part of the show, because like with Payback, it was fine. The Usos were stepping up, getting a shot against the Ascension. Cool. But then the rematch here, I guess it's just because I had no other credible teams that I could think to put into this spot. So, at that point, why even have the tag title match? Why is it here? The Ascension versus the Usos, they lost the last time. The Usos lost clean at Payback. I don't know why they got another shot, and they lost clean again. It's again just kind of padding out the Ascension's title reign. It doesn't contribute much. It's definitely the weakest match on the card. And then we move on to the TLC main event for the World Heavyweight Championship. It's Dolph Ziggler versus Edge. And this was, of course, the infamous match where Dolph Ziggler suffered his neck injury, the neck injury that plagued him all throughout. Well, it kept him absent from the majority of 2K16. It plagued him all throughout 2K17 while he was the world champion the second time around. And it was an accident. It was never planned, because what had happened was Edge took down the ladder, and I was like, okay, we're going to go to the top rope, going to hit him with a spear while he's hanging from the title, because I realized you could do that. I didn't know you could do that before, so I went for it. I was going to have Edge spear Ziggler off of that title, but instead, Ziggler fell while Edge was going to the top rope, and because of the way that he like re-angled himself, he repositioned himself to face the spear, he ended up falling like right on the ladder, or right between it. I can't remember exactly what happened, but it was just the weird animation of it, because he fell right on his neck. And that's not how it normally happens. It's all because the ladder was in the way. Usually, when you fall off the title, you'll land on your side or your back or something. But because the ladder was in the way, Ziggler landed straight on his neck, right on his shoulders, and it looked terrible. It, like, not terrible in that it looked like bad, like, oh, I shouldn't have had that in the show. Like, it looked gruesome. It looked painful. And really, what I could have done there was just said that Ziggler had a broken neck and kept him out of the series forever. Because if that had happened in real life, I think that's what would have happened. I think Ziggler would have broken his neck. He would have been done. But you never know. People take crazy bumps, but they come out of it just fine. So maybe it's not too much of a stretch to have Ziggler come back from that, because there are plenty of people who get dropped on their head multiple times. I mean, think of how many German suplexes there have been. John Cena's taken some pretty ugly bumps. A lot of people have taken really ugly bumps, but not suffered an injury. They've been fine, or at least like they were fine at first, and then like it just kind of built up to an eventual injury later on, which is kind of the route that I took with Ziggler, was that he took a really nasty bump. He managed to last the rest of the match. He defeated Edge, ended up winning. This was another kind of instance where it's just a lot of high spots, but it might have gone on longer than it needed to, kind of like the Money in the Bank finish. But Ziggler, he hit him with a zigzag, a super kick, climbed up the ladder, and retained the title. It was a good moment for Ziggler. we finally put an end to this Edge Christian, this whole rivalry, which it was good for Raw to have that, to have Ziggler, this upstart, coming into, well, not an upstart, he was a Universe Mode original, but he took down Christian, he took down the veteran, won his first title in the series, and then by defeating Christian twice and by defeating Edge twice, also Daniel Bryan thrown in there as well, Dolph Ziggler really establishes himself that he belongs in this main event picture. So having him get the win over Edge here was great, even though he did fall on his neck. And at that point, I could have made the conscious call to give the win to Edge and run with that storyline that Ziggler got injured and that's what cost him. But thematically, I don't think that made as much sense, because having Ziggler fight through it and still overcome Edge, it was a real testament to Ziggler's resolve. It was a good way to set up that foundation of his character, where he's a stubborn one. He will continue to fight even though he's injured, but he'll continue to fight through the pain. He will prove to everyone that he is the best, even if it jeopardizes his future. So I think that was a good setup through this matchup, even if it was a complete accident. I'm glad it happened though, and I'm glad I ran with it, because I could have cut that spot completely and just redid it where I actually hit Ziggler with the spear. But I saw the injury, and I saw the potential from that injury, and especially knowing that Ryback, this big hulking behemoth of a man, was going to be the next guy to step up, I thought that's perfect. That's how Ziggler, he took this high spot, and he is going to be out with an injury, but Ryback, he's this big powerhouse. All the hard shots that he would take from, like a shell shock, like all these high impact moves are going to injure Ziggler, but it's going to be through Ryback. And that's because I had already planned that Ryback was going to win the world title at SummerSlam, whether it was Christian, because originally it was going to be a rematch between Christian and Ryback at SummerSlam, but then Ziggler won the title at Extreme Rules, so I had to overhaul that plan completely. But I still was going to go with Ryback. He was going to defeat Ziggler, I think it was going to happen even if the botch hadn't taken place, even if Ziggler wasn't injured. But this gave me a really good excuse, because with Ryback winning the title at SummerSlam, I don't really know what I would have done with Ziggler after the fact. So having him get injured and be off screen on the shelf for a couple months, I think it was the best, because otherwise Ziggler would have just kind of been there, just kind of existing, not really contributing much to the overall story, not much to his character. Whereas this one botch ended up being one of the biggest plot lines throughout 2K16, throughout the build-up to WrestleMania. Well, maybe not the whole of 2K16, but like the way that 2K16 bookends, where you have the beginning, SummerSlam, the first pay-per-view, where Ziggler loses because of his neck injury, and then he comes back at Fastlane, the end of 2K16, and takes the title back from Ryback. It's got that storybook quality to it, and it was all set up in this match, completely by accident, which is just phenomenal the way that some of these things work out sometimes. Just certain coincidences are just too perfect. And that wraps up main event. That wraps up 2K15. Good God. Between both shows, we're almost at about 3 hours. We're going to be over 3 hours. That's crazy. That is crazy. But I hope you enjoyed this ride. I'm going to rank Money in the Bank now, because I need to do that. I can't forget to do that. Like I said, it's above Payback. It's the best pay-per-view in the series thus far, for reasons I spent the last hour or so talking about. And as far as Raw versus SmackDown goes, it's tough. No, it's not tough. It's Raw. Raw gets the win here. So there you go. SmackDown finally does not have now Raw has the top pay-per-view. Which, I mean, looking at this, Titus O'Neil versus Tyson Kidd could have been better. Could have been more memorable. The Ascension versus the Usos was just downright pointless. Cena versus Punk was great, but one phenomenal match is not going to save the other more so like the mediocrity or the okay matches that were representing SmackDown. Whereas with Raw, Christian versus Ryback finally completes Ryback's build up into the main event scene, and it revisits that Christian versus Ryback storyline. So there's some history behind that. Triple H versus Seth Rollins went balls to the wall, just throwing everything out I possibly could, making the matchup as bombastic as it could possibly be. Also revisiting some history between Triple H and The Shield is another high spot on the card, high point for Monday Night Raw. And then Dolph Ziggler versus Edge, just a phenomenal way to hammer the drive the pay-per-view home, to hammer home the point that Raw had outperformed SmackDown, and I'm done. I'm out of words. Great pay-per-view for Money in the Bank, so now SmackDown's coming back. SmackDown and Raw are neck and neck as we jump into 2K16. We'll have to see what exactly 2K16 has to offer. Now, I think it's going to be, this time for real, I think it is going to be a little while till I revisit 2K16. I might end up recording it before the new video game comes out, but I don't think I'm going to have the time to edit everything together, especially now that I'm putting in footage. I don't think I'm going to have the time to actually edit that video. So, and plus, at this point, when this video comes out, we're going to be really close to the release date for 2K18. I don't even remember what I said before. I feel like I said 2K17, but we are going to take a bit of a break from Behind the Universe for now. At least, well, this spot. If I could try to get out the next... I don't know. I think it's going to be What Could Have Happened. I think that's what I have lined up next, but it might just be better to hold that off until after 2K18 has come out, because I have this universe mode rush hour thing I gotta do. I'm gonna kill myself with all this work I gotta get done. I gotta hammer through for the pay-per-view, or not the pay-per-view, but for the new video game. But yeah, we're gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, and then we will resume with 2K16 at some point, and who knows, that might be a 3-parter. I mean, 2K15 had the most pay-per-views out of any of my game cycles so far. 2K16, I think, was actually the slowest. I think it had the least amount of episodes. Yeah, it had even less than 2K14, just a little bit. So, but then with 2K16, there's so much more to dig into. Now I'm going to actually be talking about certain spots in the matchups, then I'll have more to say, especially now that I'm controlling the matches. I'll have more to say about spots I attempted, what I did and didn't like I did with Payback and Money in the Bank. So, wouldn't surprise me if 2K16 ended up being a 3-parter, and I guess that'll help me make this series last longer. Not that that was my intention. I had no idea that I was going to have so much to say about 2K15, so just getting you prepped for that, because lately I've been spending like half an hour on each pay-per-view, it seems, depending on what the show is, and especially looking at the later pay-per-views of 2K16 and 2K17, where the match cards get longer, and there's more setup to future things. There's a grand narrative that I'm actually crafting at this point, so oh boy, that is going to be a journey. So thank you for joining me for Raw versus Thank you for joining me for Raw versus SmackDown so far. I hope you've enjoyed oh my god, here I had said this series was going to be a quicker way to experience the previous games, which I think it might still be. But once we get into like 2K16 and 2K17, granted, I think you should watch those videos anyway, because I think they're really good, but oh man, it might end up being just as long as the total runtime for the series. I don't know, I haven't done the math, but anyways, I'm done. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, keep on YouTube, and I'm dying! I don't know what that was. I'm fine, guys. Just bye.